I'm hoping that the hubbub on my right here is going to die down and some politeness will prevail before I call the Chancellor. Mr. Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as we mourn the tragic loss of life in Israel and Gaza, the Prime Minister reminded us last week of the need to fight extremism and heal divisions. So I start today by remembering the Muslims who died in 2 world wars in the service of freedom and democracy. We need a memorial to honour them, so following representations from the Right Honourable Member for Bromsgrove and others, I've decided to allocate £1 million towards the cost of building one. Whatever your faith or colour or class, this country will never forget the sacrifices made for our future. Madam Deputy Speaker, in recent times, the UK and the UK economy has dealt with a financial crisis, a pandemic, and an energy shock caused by war in Europe. Yet despite the most challenging economic headwinds in modern history, under Conservative governments since 2010, growth has been higher than every large European economy. Unemployment has halved, absolute poverty has gone down, and there are 800 more people in jobs for every single day that we've been in office. Of course, interest rates remain high as we bring down inflation. But because of the progress we've made, because we are delivering the Prime Minister's economic priorities, we can now help families not just with temporary cost of living support, but with permanent cuts in taxation. We do this to give much needed help in challenging times, but also because Conservatives know lower taxes mean higher growth. And higher growth means more opportunity, more prosperity, and more funding for our precious public services. But if we want that growth...
What? The Chancellor has hardly said anything. Order! You can't get excited yet. Now, other people want to hear what the Chancellor has to say, and it's matters. So, we'll have a bit of good behaviour, please. Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If we want that growth to lead to higher wages and higher living standards for every family in every corner of the country, it cannot come from unlimited migration. It can only come by building a high-wage, high-skill economy, not just higher GDP, but higher GDP per head. And that is the difference with the party opposite. Their plans destroy jobs, reduce opportunities, and risk family finances with spending that pushes up taxes. Instead of going back to square one, the policies I announced today mean more investment, more jobs, better public services, and lower taxes in a budget for long-term growth. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I start with the updated forecasts from the OBR, for which I thank Richard Hughes and his team. First, inflation. When the Prime Minister and I came to office, it was 11%. The latest figures show... I know the party opposite struck...
No, this is not amusing anymore. We need to hear what the Chancellor has to say. I can tell who's making the noise, and you simply won't get a chance to speak later. So that's the end of it. Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When the Prime Minister and I came to office, inflation was 11%, but the latest figures show it is now 4%, more than meeting our pledge to halve it last year. And today's forecasts from the OBR show it falling below the 2% target in just a few months' time, nearly a whole year earlier than forecast in the autumn statement. That didn't happen by accident. Whatever the pressures and whatever the politics, a Conservative government working with the Bank of England will always put sound money first. But we also understand that tackling inflation, while necessary, is painful. It means higher interest rates and a period of lower growth. So we've given the average household £3,400 in cost of living support over the last 2 years. Doing so makes economic as well as moral sense. The OBR predicted real household disposable income per person would fall by 2% in the last year. Instead, after this support, it is on track to rise by 0.8%. And today I take further steps to help families with cost of living pressures, starting with measures to help the poorest families. We've already abolished higher charges for electricity paid by those on prepayment meters, increased the local housing allowance, and raised benefits by double expected inflation. Today I focus on those falling into debt. Nearly 1 million households on universal credit take out budgeting advance loans to pay for more expensive emergencies like boiler repairs or help getting a job. To help make such loans more affordable, I've today decided to increase the repayment period for new loans from 12 months to 24 months. For some people, I thought they cared about people on the lowest incomes. But trust the Labour Party not to want to hear about debt. For some people, the best way to resolve debt is through a debt relief order. But getting one costs £90, which can deter the very people who need them the most. So having listened carefully to representations from citizens' advice, I today relieve pressure on around 40,000 families every year by abolishing the £90 charge completely. Next, the Household Support Fund. It was set up on a temporary basis and due to conclude at the end of this month. Having listened carefully to representations from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the Trussell Trust, and honourable members from East Ham, Colchester, Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner, and Suffolk Coastal, amongst others, I've decided that with the battle against inflation still not over, now is not the time to stop the targeted help it offers. We will therefore continue it at current levels for another 6 months. Next, I turn to a measure that will help businesses and households more broadly. In the autumn statement, I froze alcohol duty until August of this year. Without any action today, it would have been due to rise by 3%. But I've listened carefully to my right honourable friends from Altrincham and Sale West, the Vale of Glamorgan, and my right honourable friend from Murray, who is a formidable champion of the Scottish whisky industry. I also listened to Councillor John Tonks from Ash, a strong supporter of the wonderful Admiral pub, who pointed out the pressures facing the industry. So today I've decided to extend the alcohol duty freeze until February 2025. This benefits 38,000 pubs across the UK, and on top of the £13,000 saving a typical pub will get from the 75% business rates discount I announced in the autumn. We value our hospitality industry and are backing the great British pub. Another cost that families and businesses worry about is fuel. Now, the Shadow Chancellor complained about the freeze on fuel duty, and Labour has opposed it at every opportunity. The Labour Mayor of London wants to punish motorists even more with his ULEZ plans, but lots of families and sole traders depend on their car. If I did nothing, fuel duty would increase by 13% this month. So instead, I've listened to my right honourable friends for Stoke-on-Trent North, Dudley North, Witham and others, as well as the Sun newspaper's Keep It Down campaign, I have, as a result, decided to maintain the 5p cut and freeze fuel duty for another 12 months. This will save the average car driver £50 next year and bring total savings since the 5p cut was introduced to around £250. Taken together with the alcohol duty freeze, this decision also reduces headline inflation by 0.2 percentage points in 24/5, allowing us to make faster progress towards the Bank of England's 2% target. Madam Deputy Speaker, there can be no solid growth without solid finances. An economy based on sound money does not pass its bills to the next generation. When it comes to borrowing, some believe there is a trade-off between compassion and fiscal responsibility. They are wrong. It is only because we responsibly reduced the deficit by 80% between 2010 and 2019 that we could provide £370 billion to help businesses and families in the pandemic. The party opposite opposed our plans to reduce the deficit every single step of the way. But in fairness, they were consistent. The Lib Dems supported controlling spending in coalition, but now say they would prop up a party that will turn on the spending taps. It's the difference between no plan and no principles. Delighted the right honourable gentleman from the Lib Dems was here to hear it for once. Today, we say something different. There is nothing compassionate about running out of money. With the pandemic behind us, we must once again be responsible and build up our resilience to future shocks. That means bringing down borrowing so we can start to reduce our debt. And today's figures confirm that is happening. Ahead of my first autumn statement in 22, the OBR forecast headline debt would rise to above 100% of GDP. Today, they will say it will fall in every year to just 94% by 28-29. Underlying debt, which excludes Bank of England debt, will be 91.7% in 24/5, according to the OBR, then 92.8%, 93.2%, 93.2% before falling to 92.9% in 28-29, with final year headroom against debt falling of £8.9 billion. Our underlying debt is therefore on track to fall as a share of GDP, meeting our fiscal rule. And we continue to have the second lowest level of government debt in the G7, lower than Japan, France, or the United States. We also meet our second fiscal rule for public sector borrowing to be below 3% of GDP 3 years early. Borrowing falls from 4.2% of GDP in 23/4 to 3.1%, 2.7%, 2.3%, 1.6% and 1.2% in 2028-29. By the end of the forecast, borrowing is at its lowest level of GDP since 2001. None of that, of course, would be possible if Labour implemented their pledge to decarbonise the grid 5 years early by 2030. By their own calculations, that costs £28 billion a year to do. But last month, after flip-flopping for months, they said they're not going to spend the £28 billion after all, but somehow they'll meet their pledge. Somehow, Madam Deputy Speaker, can only mean one thing: tax rises on working families. Same old Labour. Today, in contrast, a Conservative government brings down taxes with borrowing broadly unchanged. In fact, borrowing is slightly lower than the autumn statement. And the fact that we are bringing borrowing down is something of particular importance to one very special person. Sir Robert Stamen is the outgoing Chief Executive of the government's Debt Management Office, and after 20 years of exceptional public service. He is in the gallery. Thank you, Sir Robert. I now turn to growth. Just after I became Chancellor, the OBR expected GDP to fall by 1.4% in the following year. In fact, it grew, albeit slowly. Now the OBR expects the economy to grow by 0.8% this year and 1.9% next year, 0.5% higher than their autumn forecast. After that, growth rises to 2.2%, 1.8% and 1.7% in 2028. Since 2010, they don't want to hear this, but these are the facts. Since 2010, we have grown faster than Germany, France or Italy, the three largest European economies. And according to the IMF, we will continue to grow faster than all three of them in the 5 years ahead. Surveys by Lloyds and Deloitte show business confidence is returning. In other words, because we have turned the corner on inflation, we will soon turn the corner on growth. And today's OBR forecasts also show that we have made good progress on the Prime Minister's three economic priorities. Compared to when the three pledges were made, inflation has halved, debt is falling in line with our fiscal rules, and growth is fully 1.5 percentage points higher than predicted. And as growth returns, they don't have a growth plan, so they might as well listen to ours. As growth returns, our plan is for economic growth not sustained through migration, but one that raises wages and living standards for families. Not just higher GDP, but higher GDP per head, and that means sticking to our plan with a budget for long-term growth, more investment, more jobs, better public services and lower taxes. And I start with investment. Economists say that stimulating investment is the most effective way to raise productivity and therefore wages and living standards. Since 2010, we've been doing just that. Business, well, you might want to listen to what I'm about to say because business investment has risen from an average of 9.3% of GDP under Labour to 9.9% under the Conservatives. And this year it will be 10.6% of GDP. That is £30 billion more business investment than if it had continued at Labour levels. And it's still going up. In the short period since the autumn statement, Nissan have announced they'll build 2 new electric car models in the UK. Microsoft and Google have announced data centres worth over £3 billion. Thanks to my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, the Global Investment Summit unlocked £30 billion of investment. In fact, since 2010, greenfield foreign direct investment has been higher than anywhere else in Europe. And for the last 3 years, we have been the third highest in the world after the United States and China. And we're not stopping there. In the autumn statement, I announced we would introduce permanent full expensing, a £10 billion tax cut for businesses that gives the UK the most attractive investment tax regime of any large European or G7 country. It was welcomed by over 200 business leaders, with the CBI saying it was a game changer and the single most transformational thing we could do to fire up the British economy. And today I take further steps to boost investment. Having listened to calls from the CBI, Make UK and the BCC, we'll shortly publish draft legislation for full expensing to apply to leased assets, a change I intend to bring in as soon as it's affordable. We'll also help small businesses, something close to my own heart, as well as the business rate support and work on prompt payments I announced in the autumn. I'll provide £200 million of funding to extend the recovery loan scheme as it transitions to the growth guarantee scheme, helping 11,000 SMEs access the finance they need. And following representations from the Federation of Small Business, as well as honourable members for Loughborough, Southend West and Rother Valley, I will reduce the administrative and financial impact of VAT by increasing the VAT registration threshold from £85,000 to £90,000 from April the 1st, the first increase in 7 years. That will bring tens of thousands of businesses out of paying VAT altogether and encourage many more to invest and grow. I now move to measures to address historic underinvestment in our nations and regions. Since we started levelling up in 2019, 2/3 of all new salaried jobs have been created outside London and the South East. We've announced 13 investment zones and 12 free ports, which continue to attract investment, including recently, thanks to the efforts of Mayor Ben Houchen from the Numa Group, who are investing £15 million into the Tees Valley investment zone. Today, working with the Levelling Up Secretary, I devolve further power to local leaders who are best placed to promote growth in their areas. I can announce the North East Trailblazer devolution deal, providing a package of support for the region potentially worth over £100 million. I'll devolve powers to Buckinghamshire, Warwickshire, and to the most beautiful county in England, Surrey. I see the Leader of the Opposition smiling because, like me, he is a Surrey boy. I know he's been taking advice from Lord Mandelson, who yesterday rather uncharitably said he needed to shed a few pounds. Ordinary families will shed more than a few pounds if that lot get in. Today, if he wants to join me on my marathon training, he's most welcome as well. Today, we continue to spread opportunity throughout the country by allocating £100 million of levelling up funding to areas including High Peak, Dundee, Conway, Erewash, Redditch and Coventry to support cultural projects in these communities, alongside support for capital projects across the country, including in Bingley. We are expanding the long-term plan for towns to 20 new places, including Darlington, home of the Treasury's fantastic Darlington Economic Campus, Coleraine, Peterhead, Runcorn, Harlow, Eastbourne, Arbroath and Rhyl, providing each with £20 million of funding to invest in community regeneration over the next decade. We'll provide £15 million in new funding to the West Midlands Combined Authority to support culture, heritage and investment projects on the recommendation of our go-getting Mayor Andy Street. And we'll allocate £5 million to renovate hundreds of local village halls across England so they can remain at the heart of their communities. And because this is a Conservative and Unionist government, we'll also set aside funding to support the Saxavord Spaceport in Shetland, an agri-food launch pad in mid-Wales, and funding to support Northern Ireland's businesses to expand global trade and investment opportunities. As a result of the decisions we take today, the Scottish Government will receive nearly £300 million in Barnet consequentials, with nearly £170 million for the Welsh Government and £100 million for the Northern Ireland Executive. I do appreciate that a tax-cutting budget is very uncomfortable for the biggest tax risers in the United Kingdom. We also want to level up opportunity across the generations, including building more houses for young people, and we're on track to deliver over 1 million homes in this Parliament. Last week, the Levelling Up Secretary allocated £188 million to support projects in Sheffield, Blackpool and Liverpool, and today I go further, allocating £242 million of investments in Barking Riverside and Canary Wharf, which together will build nearly 8,000 houses, as well as transforming Canary Wharf into a new hub for life science companies. We're launching a new £20 million community-led housing scheme supporting local communities to deliver the developments they want and need. And I'm pleased to announce the next steps for Cambridge to reach its potential to be the world's leading scientific powerhouse. I confirm there will be a long-term funding settlement for the Future Development Corporation in Cambridge at the next spending review, with over £10 million invested in the coming year to unlock delivery of crucial local transport and health infrastructure. The final levelling up measures I announced today support North Wales, where I have many happy childhood memories, in mould, following representations from the Honourable Member for the Vale of Clwyd. We will help fund the renovation of Theatre Clwyd. And I can announce this week the government has reached agreement on a £160 million deal with Hitachi to purchase the Wilfer site in Innismore and the Oldbury site in South Gloucestershire. Innismore has a vital role in delivering our nuclear ambitions, and no one should take more credit for today's announcement than my tireless, tenacious and turbocharged honourable friend Innismore. More investment by large businesses, more support for small businesses, promoting investment in our nations and regions, all part of a budget for long-term growth that sticks to our plan to deliver more jobs, better public services and lower taxes. I now turn to one of the most powerful ways to attract investment, namely supporting our most innovative industries. Outside the US, we have the most respected universities, the biggest financial services sector, and the largest tech ecosystem in Europe. We have double the AI startups of anywhere in Europe, double the venture capital investment, and a tech economy now double the size of Germany and 3 times the size of France. We're on track to become the world's next Silicon Valley. In today's budget for long-term growth, I take further steps to attract investment into our technology-related industries. I want our brilliant tech entrepreneurs not just to start here, but to stay here, including when the time comes for a stock market listing. So we'll build on the Edinburgh and Mansion House reforms to unlock more pension fund capital. We'll give new powers to the Pensions Regulator and Financial Conduct Authority to ensure better value from defined contribution schemes by judging performance on overall returns, not cost. We'll make sure there are vehicles to make it easier for pension funds to invest in UK growth opportunities. So I'm today publishing the names of the winners of the LIFTS competition. But I remain concerned that other markets, such as Australia, generate better returns for pension savers with more effective investment strategies and more investment in high-quality domestic growth stocks. So I will introduce new requirements for DC and local government pension funds to disclose publicly their level of international and UK equity investment, and I'll then consider what further action should be taken if we're not on a positive trajectory towards international best practice. I also want to create opportunities for a new generation of retail investors to engage with public markets. So we'll proceed with the retail sale for part of the government's remaining NatWest shares this summer, at the earliest opportunity, subject to supportive market conditions and value for money. We'll continue to explore how savers could be allowed to take their pension pots with them when they change job. We'll make it easier for people to save for the long term with a new British savings bond delivered through National Savings and Investment, offering savers a guaranteed rate fixed for 3 years. And today, following calls from over 200 representatives of the city and our high-growth sectors, I will reform the ISA system to encourage more people to invest in UK assets. After a consultation on its implementation, I will introduce a brand new British ISA, which will allow an additional £5,000 annual investment for investments in UK equity with all the tax advantages of other ISAs. And this will be on top of the existing ISA allowances, ensure British savers can benefit from the growth of the most promising UK businesses, as well as supporting those businesses with the capital to expand.
So far, we've had 3 major proposals. That is the alcohol duty freeze, which was due to end in August, extended until February 2025. This is a positive for pubs, but not necessarily anything to write home about. Fuel duty frozen for a further 12 months. That again was widely expected, and it's been delivered. And finally, the British ISA introduced with an extra £5,000 allowance for UK equity. Again, that was something which was expected. There are a few other issues. I mentioned earlier the £1 million memorial for Muslims who died in both world wars. The repayment period for new budgeting loans increased from 24 months to 12 months. Debt relief orders of £90 charge will be abolished. Fuel expensing to apply to leased assets as well as to bought ones. VAT registration threshold has gone up from £85,000 to £90,000. There's an investment of £242 million in Barking, Riverside and Canary Wharf to build 8,000 new houses, 20 million to a community-led housing scheme. Cambridge will receive long-term funding, plus £1 million to unlock transport and health infrastructure. That's part of the Michael Gove plan. The government's stakes in NatWest are due to be sold. So far, he's sort of halfway through the process. There's nothing glittery about this. It's a well-meaning delivery with a few good-humoured comments towards Labour, but
I turn now to our other growth industries, starting with clean
this isn't
energy.
A showman's performance.
We want nuclear to provide up to a quarter of our electricity by 2050. And as part of that, I want the UK to lead the global race in developing cutting-edge nuclear technologies. I can therefore announce that Great British Nuclear will begin the next phase of the small modular reactor selection process, with companies now having until June to submit their initial tender responses. Our brilliant Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary will also allocate up to £120 million more to the Green Industries Growth Accelerator to build supply chains for new technology ranging from offshore wind to carbon capture and storage. By January of next year, as promised in the autumn statement, we'll have a new faster connections process to the grid up and running. In advanced manufacturing, we've announced a further £270 million of investment into innovative new automotive and aerospace R&D projects, building the UK's capabilities in zero-emission vehicle and clean aviation technologies. And I now turn to our creative industries. We have become Europe's largest film and TV production centre, with Idris Elba, Keira Knightley and Orlando Bloom all filming their latest productions here. Studio space in the UK has doubled in the last 3 years, and at the current rate of expansion, next year we will be second only to Hollywood globally. In the autumn statement, I committed to providing more tax relief for visual effects in film and high-end TV. I can today confirm that we will increase the rate of tax credit by 5% and remove the 80% cap for visual effects costs in the audiovisual expenditure credit. Having worked closely with the Culture Secretary and listened carefully to representations from companies like Pinewood, Warner Brothers and Sky Studios, we'll provide eligible film studios in England with a 40% relief on their gross business rates until 2034. And having heard representations from the British Film Industry Pact and indeed the Prime Minister, we will introduce a new tax credit for UK independent films with a budget of less than £15 million. For our creative industries more broadly, we will provide £26 million of funding to our preeminent theatre, the National Theatre, to upgrade its stages. And today I particularly want to recognise the contribution of our creative industries and the tourism that comes from orchestras, museums, galleries and theatres. In the pandemic, we introduced higher 45% and 50% levels of tax relief, which were due to end in March 25. They have been a lifeline for performing arts across the country. Today, in recognition of their vital importance to our national life, I can announce I am making those tax reliefs permanent at 45% for touring and orchestral productions and 40% for non-touring productions. Lord Lloyd Webber says this will be a once-in-a-generation transformational change that will ensure Britain remains the global capital of creativity.
Hunt's claims will really need to be fact-checked because he says that we have the lowest level of debt. We continue to have the second lowest level of government debt in the G7, lower than Japan, France or the US. He talks about borrowing falls from 4.2% of GDP in 2023 to 4 to 3.1%, 2.7%, 1.6%, 1.2% by 2028-29. By the end of the forecast, borrowing is its lowest level of GDP since 2001. I think all of this is promises because of the election. It's simply rhetoric. When it comes to the arts, the government is planning to spend £26.4 million on the National Theatre to upgrade its stages. Independent films with a budget of less than £15 million will receive a new tax credit. The Treasury will also provide eligible film studios in England with 40% relief on their gross business rates until 2034. It's very showy to be actually able to talk about the arts in with any degree of positivity, but you have to place this against the appalling news yesterday of Birmingham effectively slamming the door on the arts and the vicious cuts made to the arts by a succession of second-rate ministers for digital culture, media and sport, of whom one of them is sitting not far from Mr. Hunt at the moment. It's a nonsense for Hunt to be preening about helping the arts when this government is so clearly failing to help the arts. The arts are a demonstration of our society's health. And when the arts fail, then presumably the health of our society is failing. The arts are failing.
I suspect the new theatre reliefs may be of particular interest to the Shadow Chancellor, who seems to fancy her thespian skills when it comes to acting like a Tory. The trouble is, we all know how her show ends. Higher taxes, like every Labour government in history. I'm delighted they are cheering the fact that Labour governments always put up taxes. They're right. And I also want to mention our life sciences sector, where we will support research by medical charities into diseases such as cancer, dementia and epilepsy, with an additional £45 million, including £3 million for Cancer Research UK. But I have long believed we should be manufacturing medicines as well as developing them. So I can today also announce a brand new investment by one of our greatest life science companies, AstraZeneca, led by mon ami, the irrepressible Sir Pascal Soriot. AstraZeneca made their COVID vaccine available to developing countries at cost, as a result saving over 6 million lives. And today, because of the government's support for the life sciences sector, they announced plans to invest £650 million in the UK to expand their footprint on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus and fund the building of a vaccine manufacturing hub in Speke in Liverpool. More investment, better jobs in every corner of the country in a long-term budget for growth from a Conservative government. One of the biggest barriers to investment is businesses not being able to hire the staff they need. The economy today has around 900,000 vacancies. It would be easy to fill them with higher migration, but with over 10 million adults of working age who are not in work, that would be economically and morally wrong. Those who can work should. And this is an issue that I have tackled in every budget and autumn statement I've delivered. A year ago, I abolished the pensions lifetime allowance, which pushed doctors and others to take early retirement. Ask any doctor what they think about Labour's plans to bring it back, and they will say, don't go back to square one. In the autumn, with the help of our superb Work and Pensions Secretary, we announced the Back to Work plan, which will support 1 million adults with medical conditions and reduce the number of people assessed as not needing to work by 2/3. A year ago, I also announced the biggest ever expansion of childcare, extending the 30-hour free childcare offer. Just listen. Extending the 30-hour free childcare offer to all children of working parents from 9 months. We've not had a childcare plan from Labour, so you might want to listen to ours. Our plan will mean an extra 60,000 parents enter the workforce in the next 4 years, a tremendous achievement for the Education Secretary, who I think is doing an effing good job.
I think suggesting the Education Secretary has done an effing good job is a little rich linguistically. It doesn't seem to me to be parliamentary language, but then this is the man who introduced spoonerism back into British culture. So maybe not only is he responsible for that verbal confusion, but he's also linguistically toxic. The linguistically toxic Mr. Hunt. Linguistically toxic Hunt.
And today, following representations from many people, including the CBI, I announced measures to support the childcare sector make the new investments it now needs to. So I am guaranteeing the rates that will be paid to childcare providers to deliver our landmark offer for children over 9 months old for the next 2 years. That is more people in work, more jobs, sticking to our plan in a long-term budget for growth. And I now turn to public services. I thought they were supposed to be interested in public services. I can wait.
Order. A little bit of murmuring is normal. I shouldn't be able to hear what you're saying over there. That is clearly out of order.
I think that's quite a good place to pause for the moment. The Deputy Speaker, who has already got in some rather good lines right at the beginning, she said the Chancellor's hardly said anything, which is possible. She could have made that comment at almost any point during the speech. But this is a time, I think, when we should pause out of basic decency for the length of the video. And I don't feel that this is an election budget. It's quite extraordinary. It simply doesn't feel to me like the Chancellor is gearing up for an election. This is the Chancellor trying to demonstrate that it's business as usual, which is quite strange. So from the Chancellor's point of view, this budget suggests that he is aiming for November. I think Rishi Sunak has other plans, and as I suggested earlier, I think this is the default position is that it is November, the general election. But if the Chancellor's budget doesn't go down well, Rishi Sunak will opt for May because he has nothing else to lose. I'll come back to the second part of the budget in a second video, and I'll also deal with Mr. Starmer's response. Thank you.